Everyone give Brody a hand. He's going to share with us, Lord willing, if he's good for it next week, about his adventure in Mexico on mission trip. And so we'll look forward to that. Make sure it's good with his schedule, but look forward to hearing what God has done. So, the parable we're going to be looking at today is in a tough spot. I kind of think, when you're driving down the road, occasionally you'll look over to the side and you'll see a restaurant that you had forgotten completely about. And you're like, why haven't we eaten there lately? And what it is like it's sort of in a spot where you forget about it, sometimes because there are other things happening around it. That's the parable for this morning. It's in a tough spot because this particular parable is flanked on one end by the parable of the prodigal son, which we all know, and the parable of the rich man and Lazarus on the other side, which we all know. And right here in the middle is this very difficult and less known story. It's not handled much, I think, because of its location in the text. But I think more than that, it's not handled because it's kind of weird. The story Jesus tells is about a manager who's being fired. He knows he's being fired, and on his way out, he calls his master's debtors up and he begins to discount all of their debts. It's an awkward story that we don't handle very much, but I think that whenever Jesus told the story to his audience when he was here on earth, I think it may have been one of his most popular stories. And the reason is because it addresses a concern that everyone in that generation had. You can relate to it. The same way you feel about hedge fund managers. The same way you feel about ruthless plutarchs who are robbing and stealing or, taking from people things they should not be taking from people. That's how they would have felt about this guy. These individuals, the masters who loaned money out, were not popular at all, largely because, number one, they charged too much interest, but number two, because according to Jewish law, they were not allowed to charge interest at all. How many of you would enjoy having an interest rate at 0%? Right about now, get a witness, right? We all and so they would have appreciated this story, and here's why. The master finds out that a particular manager is mishandling his funds. And everyone knew in that day that above all, a steward was required to be found faithful. Paul picks up on this, and later Peter picks up on it as an illustration for how you and I, as stewards of God's resources and His grace and His mercy, are required to be found doing nothing other than being faithful. Well, something had went wrong with this manager, and he was called in before his master. And to get a glimpse of what this would feel like, think a middle manager being called into the office of the CEO. And the CEO looking him dead in the eye and saying, "You have performed very, very poorly. And I need an explanation of what has been going on in your department, because from what I'm hearing, you are going to lose your job. In fact, you're fired. Go, bring me the books, make sure everything is in order, and then get ready to pack your desk and head home." Now, whenever the manager hears this, he knows he's in trouble deep, because all he has ever done in his life is siphon off the resources of the master. His manicured hands have never done a single day of hard labor. And he is ill-equipped to pick up the skill set of a beggar. And so he sits down, I kind of imagine, at his desk, and he thinks to himself, what am I going to do? I don't have anything that I can rely on of my own, and I'm about to lose everything that I've ever used for my own benefit. All I have in this world is the master's desk, the master's pen, the master's books, the master's resources, and my relationship with the master's debtors. He's in trouble and he knows it. Now, if trouble, struggles are the mother of invention, this guy has an idea that is pregnant with potential. He decides in this epiphany, as he looks and he sees all he has belongs to the master and wonders, what am I going to do? What can I do for the next few minutes that's going to help me for the next few years? He thinks to himself, I know what I'm going to do so that I can keep this relationship with my master's debtors, so that whenever I am unemployed, I can go to them and they will help me. And he begins to call his master's debtors in one at a time. Some guy owes the master 100 measures of oil. And the manager has him sit down and says, write 50 in your ledger. He calls in another guy, and this guy owes the master 100 measures of wheat. And he brings him in, the manager does, and says, you sit down quickly right here in the books and you write 80. Now, let me explain to you what's happening here. In this day, they were not able to manage accounts behind firewalls and underneath, secure passwords. So they had a very elegant way of managing accounts. The ledger, where the records were kept, was managed by the debt holder, by the note holder. And any changes to that debt were written in the hand of the debtor, the one who owed the money. And so this way, both parties were protected. And this was a brilliant plan. It worked great, unless, of course, it was the manager's last day. Just think for a moment how great this would feel. To get a call up from Bank of America or whoever's got your mortgage or your car note, and some guy on the other line saying, hey, my name is Max. I'm the one who handles your account. I just want you to know, long story short, it's my last day. I'm doing favors. I'm cutting your mortgage rate in half, and I'm reducing what you owe on your car payment. How many of you would love for that guy to manage your account for a single day? Right, that would be great. Can you imagine how that must have ingratiated the debtors to this manager, all because of his relationship to the master? Well, of course, the plan worked beautifully. The next time the guy needed a meal and he called someone up and said, hey, you may remember me. I'm the guy who saved you thousands of dollars on your auto insurance. Not that. I'm the guy who saved you thousands of dollars on your mortgage, on your car. No, I'm the guy. And I'm just curious, what are you eating tonight? That guy gets an invitation to supper every single night in my house, right? He's ingratiated. Now, everybody in the crowd would have loved this, because here is this very wealthy, this very manipulative, hedge fund style top CEO who's eating high on the hog, except for he's Jewish, so it wouldn't be a hog. He's eating high on the lamb, and he's loving life. And everyone else, he's siphoning off of them. And finally, this guy gets what he deserves. The crowd would have loved this parable. So what's the master's response in this story? Well, you can imagine the master would have been upset. He would have been torqued, bothered by the fact that he's been manipulated and his resources been misappropriated. It would have been a problem, but nobody cares about that because, he's the wealthy guy. We're the blue collar people. We're the poor people. And so it doesn't really matter. But Jesus, he doesn't focus in on that. He focuses in on one particular emotion. He says, the master commended the servant for his actions. Now that may seem weird to you, Because you may think to yourself, would a CEO in the real world actually feel that way about someone taking advantage of him? And the answer is probably at least a little. Sure, he would have been upset. He would have been bothered by it. But at the same time, as an individual who knows that the game requires you to leverage someone else's resources for your own benefit, like that's the world he lives in. That's the kind of person he is. For someone else to make a move like that, he would have at least looked at it and said, not bad. Think of it this way. This year, in the fall, Virginia Tech is going to play some football games. So is Tennessee. And at some point during the year, I promise you, Tennessee is going to lose a game. It's going to happen. Virginia Tech probably will lose a game. Now, the coach of each respective team isn't going to enjoy being beat. But whenever he looks back over the game film, he's going to watch the other team and he's going to think, man, that was a good move. That was smooth. The answer is yes, because he loves the game. There's a passion for the game. He doesn't enjoy getting beat, but he does love the tactics. That's what's happening here. The manager, like one of the key processes for me whenever I encounter some weird passage in the Word of God is what's happening in the text here is Jesus is saying this guy did something incredibly smart with someone else's wealth. And then he turns to the crowd and says, essentially, I wish all of God's people were as smart and shrewd as this guy is. Weird, isn't it? This guy embezzled a lot of money. I wish God's people were that shrewd and smart to use someone else's resources to benefit themselves in the future. What's happening here? Well, one of the important approaches to interpreting parables requires that you and I understand exactly what the parallel is here. And then from that, to figure out how does our life connect and parallel what's happening in the story. And so, having seen that what Jesus is actually saying here is that it is shrewd whenever you take someone else's resources and use it for your own benefit. And then we ask the question, what might that look like in our life? I personally find three parallels, and I want to give them to you very quickly. Number one, you are fired. You're fired. Now, I'm not saying your boss called me and told me on Sunday morning to announce that to you in the church, but the reality is you and I are being fired. The notice for our termination may be 30 days. It could be 30 years. It could be 30 minutes. But the reality is every single one of us are being terminated. Everybody knows this. Whether you're religious or you're not religious, everyone knows that eventually every single person who lives does what? Yeah, we die. We are being fired. Scripture, of course, for the believer tells us that an end to life is not an end to living, because after we die, we face the judgment. There's something out past this. And so we are, in fact, being fired. We are being let go. Number two, in addition to the fact that we are being fired, so we are like the manager in that sense. Number two, we are like the manager in the sense that we have access to the master's resources. He holds it all. Everything that makes you up, everything that is inside of you, everything that is you, is owned and created by the infinite wealth of the master. Now, I know for you and I, we feel like, especially in this culture, in this country, that like what we own is ours. It's my possession, and I can do with it what I want. But the reality is there is nothing in this world that you and I can actually call our own. Not in a real sense. If you read the email this week, which I'm sure everybody reads the emails, Hint. If you read the email this week, you saw that I included this example. So if you leave this worship center and you head out through the church library, on the other side of the church library, you reach a room called the pastor's library, the pastor's office. And in the pastor's office, you will find the pastor's desk, and you will find the pastor's chair, and you will find the pastor's bookshelves, and that whole room belongs to the pastor. But if you came in there one day and you saw that I had painted a large orange power tee on the wall of the pastor's office, you would have questions as to what I was doing, even though that office is mine, because we know that when we say the office belongs to the pastor, it doesn't actually belong to the pastor, does it? It's his to use, but he is only a steward. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the exact same truth for our possessions in this world. At your personal address, in your bank account, every bit of that is yours the same way that the stuff in that office belongs to me. It's mine, but it's not mine to do with anything that I want. I am a steward of the possessions in that office the same way that you are a steward, and I am a steward of the possessions we hold in our home and in our car and in our bank account. Those possessions actually belong to God Himself. So number one, like the manager, we are being fired. Number two, like the manager, we are stewards of the resources of the master, and we still have access to those resources. We are all lame duck employees on our way out the door, but we've sat down at a desk with nothing but the things that belong to the master, asking, what do we do with these? How can we leverage this in such a way so that it matters at some point past the end of my life? Which brings us to the third parallel. You can take it with you. Like the master, like the manager in this story, there is a way you can make sure that the resources today benefit you into the future. Now, I know, because I've said it myself, you can't take it with you. I've never seen a Brinks truck following a hearse. All right? And I know there's some truth to that. But if you were to leave this country and go to another country, at some point you would probably stop by a bank or an agency, and you would take your American money and you would translate it into the currency of the land that you're going to. You would take it with you. Now, we are told that here there are two kingdoms. There's the kingdom of this world that you and I live in that is fleeting and falling away. And then there is the kingdom of our Christ that is rising and will last for eternity. And the same way that you and I, when we cross the border of this country into another, would stop and translate our currency into the currency of that kingdom, you and I can translate our possessions into the currency of heaven. What is the currency of heaven? The currency of heaven are the only things that last forever. Because that's how our God works. He works in eternal forms. And so the only thing that lasts forever, the currency of heaven, are two notes. The souls of man and the word of God. Everything else that you and I see, that we experience, that we touch, everything else in this world is going to fail. It's going to fall. It's going to decay, or it's going to be wiped out in a purging judgment. The only thing that makes it past that veil into eternity are the souls of man and the words of God. And if you and I really want to invest for the future, that's where we do it. We take, because we have been fired, we take what belongs to God, the master. and we leverage it for eternal benefits, so that we, like Paul, can look at the sons of our faith like Timothy and say, I have fought the good fight. I've laid up for myself a treasure in heaven. He is banked on the fact that this life is not the end, and there is something out past it, and he is invested in those elements and in those opportunities. That's why Jesus looks and says, for the people of this world are more shrewd dealing with their own kind. The master looks at the manager and nods his head and says, good move. And they're more shrewd and wise in dealing with their own kind than the sons of Lot are. And I love what Jesus does next here. I kind of think maybe there's a little joke in the air whenever he says, you need to do the same thing. You need to invest in the same way, so that whenever you get to heaven, make friends, Jesus says, of yourself using unrighteous mammon. So that whenever you get to heaven, those friends that you've made here on earth may allow you to come in and sleep on their couch. It's a paraphrase, but I think that's what he's saying. Where he's saying this matters. What you do now with your possessions, what we do now with the gifts and resources that God has given us matter now for eternity. Which is why Jesus goes on to say that if you're not faithful in little things, in temporary things that fall away, who's going to bless you with greater things? That makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if someone comes to you and they say to you, I want to borrow your weed eater. And they take your weed eater, good neighbor, he uses it for a week or two and he brings it back and he sets it on your front porch and it's now in 3 pieces. And he looks at you and says, that was a really tough job, and turns around and walks away. And he comes back to you the following week and says, hey, listen, I know I messed up the weed eater thing. I'm not asking you to borrow the weed eater, but I would very much love to borrow your zero-turn riding mower. Are you going to let that person borrow your riding mower? No, you're not. Why? Because they weren't faithful in the little things. And Jesus goes on to press the metaphor a little more. He says, and if you're not going to be faithful in things that don't belong to you, who's going to entrust you with things that are actually yours? I mean, if you take your tablet and you loan it to your 6-year-old, you let them play with it, or to your grandchild, or to your niece or your nephew, and they bring it back to you and the screen is shattered and there's a bite mark in the corner, or whatever. I mean, are you at Christmas time going to turn around and go and buy them the same tablet? The answer is no. Why? Because you're not going to waste your money on something you know they're not going to manage well. This is exactly what Jesus is saying here. That the wisest people will use God's small resources here to do greater things. And that in some way that you and I cannot possibly understand, cannot fully glimpse, that those investments are going to matter for eternity. I don't think I told very many of you all that I am actually a billionaire. No kidding. No kidding. I am actually a billionaire. I have in my hand here a $100 billion banknote printed in 2008 by the government of Zimbabwe. In 2008, the government there was experiencing a season of hyperinflation. Thank God that will never happen here. And now stay with me, all right? And so they began to print money. I mean, massive amounts of money. So much so that by the end of 2009, this $100 billion banknote was only worth around 40 cents. It's significant. And the reason it was only worth 40 cents, the reason it doesn't matter that it's $100 billion is because it it failed. The economy, at least at that point, and they've recovered much since, but at that point, the economy had failed to the point where, like, these things weren't, like, you can't, they're now completely worthless. Completely worthless. Why? Because that system failed. This is what Jesus means whenever he says, make friends for yourself of the unrighteous mammon, the unrighteous resources of this world, so that when it what? When it fails. Not if it fails, not should the Fed not be able to get it back together, not should the wrong person get voted into the White House. No, so that when it fails, because they all fail. The only thing that lasts forever is the currency of heaven. And the currency of heaven is the souls of man and the words of God, so that you and I know where we are called to put our treasure, to invest our resources. And by the way, let me just tell you, this is not a sermon about tithing. I mean, is that an application? You bet it is. But this isn't simply about tithing. This is about a complete alteration of how you and I see the blessings that we have been given in this world. So that we don't view ourselves as receptacles of blessing with arms wide open, ready to receive all that the Father who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills is ready to give to us. That's not Christianity. We are not blessing conduits. Blessing receptacles, we are blessing conduits, a pathway by which God uses us as instruments of His grace to pass on the stuff that He gives to us, because we are nothing but stewards. Would you pray with me for a moment? This is a tough one. Because like you, every single one of us, we need stuff. But stuff can be so toxic, drawing our attention away from what the Father freely wants us to have, freely and lovingly gives us. It draws our attention instead to the stuff that we don't have. And so that becomes the pursuit of how much we can amass and accumulate, when the real investment, the real wise steward, the real wise manager will recognize that she is being fired. He is being let go. The termination notice has been presented, and it's only a matter of time. What will we do? Right there where you are, can we all just pray for the Father to reprogram us, so that we stop seeing our life about us and our possessions about what we want, and instead start asking the question of how can we invest in eternity?